Ah, yes. The time has come once again to speak of the Disney Unholy Trinity. A while back, I made a video talking about Ralph Breaks the Internet and why I thought it was a completely awful movie and quite possibly the worst sequel ever made, at least of the sequels that I've seen. But that was just the beginning. Today, I intend to discuss a movie that I believe is even worse than Ralph Breaks the Internet, for very different reasons. And I'm sure to many people's surprise, this movie isn't even one of Disney's recent releases. It is in fact one of their classic films, that being the Aristocats. Once upon a time, I actually used to like this movie. Well, sort of. I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was fairly entertaining with a few boring parts. However, not that long ago, I rewatched the film, and I was utterly floored by how awful it actually was. I was in utter disbelief at some of the stuff I was seeing. And this mostly comes from the fact that you never hear anyone say why they think the Aristocats is a terrible movie. I mean, most people say they either thought it was decent or just mediocre. But no, my friends. This movie is one of the absolute worst ever made. And by the end of this video, I think you will understand why I think that is the case. Oh my, where to begin? Firstly, I want to say that even though the animation in this movie is good, I find that this is one of the overall most subpar looking films Disney has ever made. It came from what I like to call the scratchy era, when they didn't use cells to paint the frames, but instead painted on top of the original drawings from the animators instead. With some exceptions, this budget-saving look made many of the films from this time look worse in my opinion. But even compared to most of the other Disney animations from this time, I find this movie is still lacking, as the scratchy look is even more present in this film than the others. And it doesn't even fit the style of the movie. Whereas films like 101 Dalmatians and Robin Hood can fit the rough and rugged look, this is a movie about fancy cats in Paris. The scratchiness just doesn't fit the aesthetic or the story and its tone. And additionally, I find a lot of the backgrounds in this movie are often boring or even lazy in some cases. Overall, this is probably the third worst looking film that Walt Disney Animation Studios has ever made. The only ones that look worse are Chicken Little and Dinosaur, if you're wondering. But of course, the animation is the least of this movie's problems. That is why I wanted to get it out of the way first. Because now it's time to talk about the real problems. The ones that will make you yell at the screen and want to pull your hair out kind. While it may not be obvious just yet, this movie is already establishing a good portion of its greatest problems in its first scene. First, we see the kittens being pampered like the precious things they supposedly are, but we also see how they annoy Edgar and get away with it. The Madame even says that they are making it harder for him, and even though she is only referring to this one scene, her words will echo true for the entire movie, trust me. The cats also try to show thanks to the horse for bringing them here, but they show no thanks to Edgar despite the fact that he drove them here, and trust me, that is an important detail. Before we can talk about the rest of the scenes in this movie, I must first establish the main cast of cats in this movie, and how terrible they are as our main heroes. Let's see. We have Annoying Jerk number 1, Annoying Idiot number 1, Sexist Stereotype number 1, and Sexist Stereotype number 2. What an amazing cast of characters. It's a good thing they don't all suck for various reasons. Let's start out with the boys first. Almost every joke involving these two boils down to how hilarious it is when they bother other people or act like jerks and idiots for no particular reason. I can't think of a single redeeming quality about either of them. They also get really whiny later in the movie about pretty much everything, and the only things that make them happy are when Mr. Creepface, oops, my bad, I meant to say Thomas O'Malley, shows up later and promotes their bad behavior. And then of course we have the women, who are some of the most painfully sexist stereotypical characters I have ever seen. Duchess's only character traits usually involve being proper, being pretty, being ladylike, having manners, or being romantic. Not only is this the formula for the most cliche female character ever, but it's both boring to not give her any real character traits, and bad to essentially tell girls in the audience that they have to be like a Duchess or they aren't being a good lady. lady. And I'm not exaggerating here. Duchess literally tells her daughter not to wrestle with her brothers because it isn't ladylike.
Marie, darling, Marie, you must stop that. This is really not ladylike.
Never mind the fact that female cats wrestle with male cats all the time in real life. I should know because I have cats. Or that girls can like rough things and still be proper ladies. What you do or like is not what makes anyone boy-like or girl-like. Those are outdated perspectives that restrict freedom of expression and make people feel like outcasts for liking something society told them they shouldn't. I mean, I like the TV show Sofia the First, even though it's been deemed both a kid's show and a girl's show. Does liking Sofia the First make me any less of a man? Don't answer that, it's a hypothetical question. And also for Marie here, she is not much better than her mother, since pretty much the only thing she ever does in the entire movie is get all romantic inside when she sees her mother falling in love with Thomas O'Malley and become a damsel in distress several times for Thomas O'Malley to save. That was pretty much every notable thing she ever did in the whole movie. Well, that and, sing. You know, when they force us to sit through one of the most painful songs I have ever heard in my life. Just listen to this.
So-me, so-do-do, so-me-do. Every truly cultured music student knows.
And this song goes on well long enough to be very painful. Oh, and did I mention, these disrespectful jerks also make fun of Edgar by painting an unflattering picture of him and laughing at it, despite the fact he has never done anything wrong to them before. Even Duchess, who is supposed to be the respectable one, who knows best, still laughs. And though she corrects herself, it is played out as if they are right for mocking Edgar. But they are absolutely not, because unlike us, they do not know what he is planning yet. The writers intentionally saved this scene until after Edgar decides to get rid of him, but that is a deliberately manipulative move. They did this to make him seem more villainous than he actually is. Despite the fact that this movie has only just begun, they are already gaslighting us into believing Edgar was always a bad person, even though there is no evidence of him doing anything bad before this, and his only crime is relocating some pets into the countryside. Speaking of Edgar, this is when we reach what I consider to be this movie's most fatal flaw, that he is probably the most justified Disney villain of all time. He basically did nothing wrong, or at the very least his crimes were extremely minimal compared to his good side. Well, more of a side in which he honestly has a good point. A point strong enough to arguably justify his actions against the relatively small crime, one in which no one was hurt or killed, mind you, and yet the movie wants us to side with the self-obsessed jerks that are the cats who have never done anything to deserve the riches they are about to be bestowed. The Madame is not a very nice person. She is obviously a spoiled rich brat who only cares about her rich friends. She also insults Edgar for simply doing his job and introducing the attorney.
George! Oh, God!
Oh, my goodness, Edgar. I know it's yours.
Showing a glimpse at how little she actually cares about him. Then, after that, her friend the attorney and her laugh at the idea of Edgar inheriting the fortune.
You mean to say you're leaving a vast fortune to Edgar?
Oh, no, George, to my cats.
Showing that they clearly believe in the superiority of the rich and the suppression of the poor. To them, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're poor, you ought to serve the rich all your life.
You've heard of the golden rule, haven't you? Whoever has the gold makes the rules.
Why would I or anyone in the audience ever want to root for someone who thinks like this? Additionally, I've already explained how annoying the cats are, so it's basically impossible to root for them as well. They have all lived perfect lives, free from work, stress, or effort. Meanwhile, Edgar works his butt off every single day to barely any reward or acknowledgement. Yet the Madame decides the cats, not Edgar, deserve to inherit her belongings.
Life's not fair, is it?
Sure, she includes Edgar in her will, but only after the cats. Not only is this unfair, but it is extremely biased and genuinely stupid. The idea that the cats are in charge is terrible for so many reasons. Living their pampered lives has made them think only of themselves, which will likely lead to Edgar receiving the brunt of their ignorance and selfishness. All just to get something that he deserved far more. And make no mistake, he deserved to inherit the house. Not to mention, though his math may be off in some areas,
4 times 12 and multiplied by 9 times...
the lifespans of the cats is long enough to greatly reduce the value of the fortune.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
Especially since by the time he gets it, he will be too old to actually enjoy it. And need I remind you, prior to the events of this film, Edgar did absolutely nothing wrong, and when he tries to get rid of the cats, he just tries to bring them to the country, not kill them or anything. Sure, it may have been a slightly criminal thing to do, but he never intended anything bad to happen to them. He just wanted what was rightfully his, what he had worked for years to earn. Some people might say that Edgar isn't justified because he would have still been in charge as the only human.
Do you think I'm an idiot?
If he was supposed to be in charge, then why did the madam include the part about him in her will? Either she would have said the fortune is going to Edgar, not the cats, or she would have said it's going to the cats and not mentioned Edgar whatsoever being after the cats. Secondly, it's not only about being in charge, it's about Edgar receiving recognition for his work. The way the will is designed is to make Edgar the least important part of the family and household, despite the fact that he does almost all the work. Thirdly, even if Edgar still did inherit everything with the cats being placed in front of him in the will, then that would just make Edgar stupid. And stupid villains aren't much better than illogical ones. Some may argue that Edgar should have just talked it out with the Madame, but I believe the reason he didn't was because of how little the Madame actually cares for him. He was already shocked when he first heard the will writing that he would even be acknowledged, showing that the bar for him receiving any respect at all was already low. And when he heard it was going to the cats, his reaction was one in which he seemingly expected this to happen, showing that he knows the Madame cares more about her cats than him, and thus any argument he brings will probably be shot down by the Madame immediately, because the gap between him and the cats is so large, he will never be able to convince her to change it. It's actually fairly smart for him to not ask her anything, as that would just make his soon-to-be crime more suspicious as being him who did it. My ultimate point being that it is basically impossible to root for the cats over Edgar, as Edgar is the underdog character who just wants respect, whereas the cats only think of themselves and are just annoying. Even if Edgar does kidnap them, that is the only bad thing he does in the whole movie, and even he was debatably justified in doing it. If this crime went to court, he would have a strong argument against the Madame for valuing animal life over human life and refusing to respect hardworking individuals. Of course, all that leads us to the actual kidnapping scene, in which first of all we have some scenes of Edgar driving the cats away. Nothing too special or offensive, though I do find it slightly ridiculous that none of the cats wake up despite the extremely loud motorcycle sounds. We even see one of them slightly open his eyes, which means they couldn't have been that deep asleep. Honestly, they should have just left out the eye opening. It would have made their supposed deep sleep a bit more believable. However, that is nothing compared to the next scene. What happens on screen next has to be seen to be believed. You know, the part with Edgar and the man-eating dogs. Where do I even start with all the problems in this scene? Firstly, it's completely illogical. And before you go typing in the comments, yes, I know this is a cartoon, and cartoons are known for being illogical, but this isn't merely a case of the film being cartoonish. My problem is that the film is only this cartoonish exclusively in the scenes with Edgar and these dogs, and nowhere else in the entire film. Nothing in the film prior to this would imply such leaps in logic like the anti-gravity defying bridge shenanigans, the motorcycle halves driving themselves, and even making turns with no drivers at some point. Edgar landing on his motorcycle perfectly, despite being at the whims of the air and having no control over where he lands. The dog in the sidecar not having any effect on Edgar or his motorcycle when he pulls against them. Edgar and the dog being able to jump off the windmill, despite it looking like it's made of a somewhat thin and weak structure, as well as it being spinning while the characters jump. The absurdity of Edgar landing perfectly on his motorcycle a second time. Or lastly, the entire windmill being pulled from its spot by Edgar on his little motorcycle. None of this would be a problem if the movie had already established itself as an over-the-top, super cartoonish film, but it hasn't. It has been fairly grounded up to this point and rarely strayed from very basic cartoon logic. At this point, it may as well just be the freaking Looney Tunes with how over-the-top it is.
What's up, Doc?
And another problem with this scene is how it basically just introduces new villain characters. Oh wait, my bad. Apparently these dogs aren't villains. Or at least not in how the movie wants us to see them, since in all of their appearances we're supposed to be rooting against Edgar. But I have not ever once watched this movie and rooted for the dogs over Edgar. You know why? Because they are way worse than he is. Firstly, they attacked him for absolutely no reason other than they wanted to eat him. They have no knowledge of his theft or crime, and he has never done anything to them before to warrant revenge or anything like that. They are just vicious and vile dogs. Oh, and did I mention, they want to eat him alive? I literally cannot comprehend how the movie expects us to root for them over Edgar, who has only been screwed over thus far in the movie despite his hard work. But arguably, the biggest problem with this scene is that it is completely pointless. It is clear to me that this scene, as well as the other one later, were only added to the movie to both pad out the runtime and give Edgar something to do, since the writers probably realized that he didn't have anything meaningful to do in between removing the cats and when they return. The writers, of course, fixed this problem of him having nothing meaningful to do by giving him something meaningless to do.
Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
Since we later find out that Edgar is satisfied with how far away he took the cats, he didn't need to be forced to drop them here by random savage dogs. And said dogs who appear here and in the other scene later only appear in said scenes and have no impact on the finale of the film. They are also extremely pointless for what role they play in the movie since they are villains, but we already have a villain. And these guys don't even have an effect on, nor even a single scene with the main cat characters. All this nonsensical scene does is set up another equally pointless scene later on. Every plot thread set up here is concluded before the finale. So if you just cut this scene and the second one, the plot of the movie would be completely unchanged.
After all, enough's enough.
I suppose in the next scene we are supposed to feel bad for the Madame that her cats are gone, but I only laugh. Ha! She brought this upon herself with her absurd biases and disrespect for hard work. Anyways, back to the cats. Now it is time for the greatest character introduction ever. And by greatest, I of course mean insultingly awful. Literally, the first thing that Thomas O'Malley does is sing a song about himself. And not just a song about himself, a song about how great he is and how much he knows and is loved by all.
I'm king of the highway, Prince of the Boulevard.
We're not talking about the ironic kind of song, in the vein of, say, the opening song from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, but a song we are actually supposed to take seriously. Not a great start, but it gets worse. He then starts hitting on Duchess as soon as he sees her.
Telling my friends of the social elite, or some cute cat I happen to meet.
I don't like where this is going.
Acting like his flirtatious attitude is somehow highly attractive.
Whatever I take is the road I make.
Stop!
And unfortunately, because this movie is this movie, it seems to agree with him.
O'Malley.
Stop!
And I'm very proud of that.
FBI should be knocking on his door any minute now.
But I like to call this attitude being a creep. He even almost calls Duchess a beautiful babe at one point.
Helping beautiful damsels in distress is my specialty.
And this is the first time he's ever met her. And later, he even goes on to actually start calling her babe. And what makes it even worse than that is how the movie genuinely portrays the idea of hitting on women you don't know as a successful strategy to win them over. I don't think I need to tell you that that is an absolutely awful strategy to make a girl like you. Especially if all you have to say in your flirtations is how great you are, not her. Sure, he also adds something about her eyes.
Why, your eyes are like sapphires sparkling so bright. They make the morning radiant.
But that is the most cliched thing anyone could possibly say, and I assure you, that won't work in real life very well either. And on the flip side, but equally as problematic, is Duchess's reaction. She responds in a way that implies many things, none of which are particularly great. One being the simple problem of her confirming this movie's gender stereotypes, by having her see this male cat as some strong, attractive man, even though the man only talks about himself and says the most fake, flirtatious stuff ever. This implies that women should find men like this attractive, which, while I don't exactly know what women find attractive, I certainly hope that it would not be this. Secondly, in this scene, we also have her daughter be attracted to this male cat.
How romantic.
which just further pushes the idea of women finding this attractive. But it also further adds the idea that all women are romantic, which is also not true. And finally, it implies that women's lives are improved when they revolve around men. Another highly problematic idea. And on top of all these other problems, I feel I should also mention the sheer coincidence of the cats meeting Thomas O'Malley. If Edgar didn't drop them right here, they may have never met him and thus never gotten back home, which means we can also add plot convenience to the list of problems in this scene. Oh, and as soon as Thomas O'Malley sees her kids, he doesn't even consider the idea that she may already be with another cat. He doesn't even bring this up to make things clear. He continues to hit on her despite not knowing if she may already be married. For all he knows, she is just unfaithful and wants a new, better boyfriend or something like that. Instead of pulling himself together, he doubles down on his ego and desires, which is not helping his case for being a likable character. But, that's just a character introduction, Maybe they start off bad, but they might be able to redeem themselves later on. So, how does Thomas O'Malley endear himself to the other cats, as well as us, the audience, which is more important? Let's see, by being a greedy jerk, of course. Wait, that doesn't sound very endearing. You see, my friends, what he does next is viciously frighten an innocent milk truck driver. This, by the way, almost causes the truck driver to run over Duchess and her kittens. But, I'm sure that's a very unimportant detail. The movie draws no attention to it, probably because it would make Thomas O'Malley look bad. And you know what O'Malley's ultimate plan is? Well, it's to stow away on this guy's car, which is not his, yet Duchess and the other cats act as if he's giving them exactly what he promised, which he is not. And not just because there are no flying carpets like he said, but because he didn't have anything to give in the first place. He is basically stealing something and passing it off as his own to make himself look better. Did I mention that once he does this, Duchess praises his bravery? So now we are calling people who assault and steal from others brave? Well, anyways, right about now is a quiet scene of Madame being worried. And hilariously, Duchess says over this scene,
She loves us very much. Poor Madame. In that big mansion, all alone.
Further confirming her biases and that she only gave the inheritance out of favoritism. Also, Edgar shows up and has a scene where he spills the beans on his plan for no particular reason. Firstly, it is just stupid for him to say anything out loud. But furthermore, I have always hated these scenes where animals can hear what humans say, but humans can't understand animals. But apparently, all the animals can understand each other. It's just the most convenient kind of plot contrivance, and I hate it. And this scene is a Class A abuse of that trope in order to make the plot progress. Well, back to Creepface and his gullible girlfriend. Looks like he's still stealing from people and passing their stuff off as his own. And of course, when he does this, Duchess praises him again, despite the fact he did no work to earn the cream or this ride, and stole both of them. Also, by drinking from this cream, the cats are also contaminating the entire jug of which they drank from, ruining its potential sales from this man. I don't understand why we are supposed to be rooting for them. They are literally ruining this driver's day and his supplies. Additionally, because they contaminated one of his creams, he will probably end up throwing out the whole supply just to be safe, which means not only will he lose money, but if this isn't his own business, he will surely be fired and out of a job. Are we supposed to feel bad for O'Malley, Duchess, and the kittens when the milk truck driver finds them and kicks them out?
I think not.
He was full well in the right to kick them out, and I feel bad for him, not the cats. And then the Duchess has the gall to call him horrible.
Oh, what a horrible, horrible human.
Unbelievable. This just lines up once again with this movie's bias towards upper-class people and seeing all hardworking lower-class citizens as the villains, no matter how much they are in the right. After they get kicked off the truck, the cats decide to walk along a railroad instead. But uh-oh, looks like a train's coming, time to get out of the way, and for some unknown reason, no really, they don't show us, Marie falls into the river below. And I feel I must point out another unfortunate fact here, that Marie, the only girl kitten, is the only only one who ever ends up in trouble and needs to be saved. It's as if this movie portrays women as somehow inexplicably always needing to be saved and rescued. And whenever they are rescued, it is always by a man, since Thomas O'Malley is the only one who ever saves anyone, with one exception where he needs to be saved. But that part also has its problems, which we'll get to in a moment. But furthermore, it promotes the idea that men save damsels in distress, and when they do so, it is always heroic. And when O'Malley himself is in danger, it is only because he was brave and put himself at stake. Unlike Marie, who just inexplicably came to be in danger by simple fact of being a woman. But anyways, Thomas O'Malley saves Marie, but he's now trapped in the river instead. But don't worry, he will soon be saved by some oversexualized geese. Never thought I would say that when I started this channel. Oh yeah, you're probably wondering what I'm talking about. Well, there are these two female geese characters that show up and save Thomas O'Malley. Sort of. They kind of make things worse first, and then save him. But anyways, this movie really loves to place emphasis on their butts, as they are always shaking them back and forth as they walk. And trust me, I'm not reading between the lines here. When Thomas O'Malley grabs their tails while he is sinking, they react the same way a person would if they had their butt smacked. And the response to this is,
This is no time for fun and games.
And when they dive to save Thomas O'Malley, they stick their butts straight up and say,
Bottoms up.
Sure, geese do stuff like this in real life, and I find it rather crude how someone in real life thought to connect geese and their butts to women, and then actually put it into a Disney movie. Just more stuff to add on to the sexism and female objectification pile this movie has created. And when Thomas O'Malley is ultimately saved, the way the scene plays out implies that it is embarrassing for a man to be helped by a woman. Compare this to how it was seen as heroic for Thomas O'Malley to save Marie. It implies that men should do everything themselves and asking for help is weak, but women should always ask for help, since men are so dependable and strong and brave. This is just plain stupid. Asking for help doesn't make anyone weak, and no one should be embarrassed if they need help. Anyone who helps someone else should also be thanked and treated with respect, and not shrugged off because you believe that you don't need their help. Literally everyone needs help in their lives at multiple points. Additionally, this scene implies that women shouldn't help men, and that doing so is an insult to the man, since the movie expects us to find it funny that he needs help from ladies. And this further stretches to the idea that men should do all the work while women just sit and look pretty. You know, in general, outside of this one rescue scene and the female horse kicking Edgar at the end, none of the women in this entire movie do virtually anything at all. The plot is progressed almost entirely by men, all while the women sit around in awe. I mean, for Pete's sake, even the very first ever Disney movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs from 1937, actually had its female characters do stuff that was relevant to the plot. Or how about Sleeping Beauty, a movie that came out 11 years before this one, where the plot was primarily progressed by female characters. Oh, and did I mention that after these geese save Thomas O'Malley, this is how he thanks them.
Yeah, honey, get those two web-footed lifeguards out of here.
What's wrong with you?
I mentally do not understand how I'm supposed to like this character in any way. He isn't even slightly grateful for the fact that they saved him. Furthermore, Duchess is somehow completely unfazed by his extremely jerkish reaction here. And when she forces him to change his mind, by asking nicely, I might add, since, you know, women only talk in soft, proper voices and never get angry, am I right?
No.
Once she does this, the best response O'Malley could come up with wasn't sorry, or thank you, or even a reluctant thanks, I guess. No, his response is,
Hiya, chicks.
wow. Even when he should be thanking others and apologizing, he instead refuses to admit his mistakes and doubles down on his creep side, objectifying them instead. Thomas O'Malley is truly the greatest character in all of Disney history. Oh, and also when the geese laugh at his response, he decides to mock them, and the geese's response to him mocking them is to say that he is charming, and not in a funny, haha, they didn't get that he insulted them, haha way, but in oh, he thinks he's very funny, how charming, as if he didn't just insult them. Do I even need to say why this is a problem? Insulting people should never be considered charming, period. Just a moment later, Thomas O'Malley is also reluctant to say he isn't Duchess's husband, which is also highly problematic because it implies that he has already claimed her as his own, despite not even knowing her for very long.
Wow.
The greatness of this character just keeps increasing, and when the geese finally start calling out his creep actions, we are supposed to find them in the wrong, but every word they said was true. Well, anyway, they then start heading out to find Uncle Waldo. And now, of course, we actually get to meet Uncle Waldo. And he may actually be the worst character in this entire movie. Outside of the racist cat that I haven't got to yet, of course. And this may just be one of the stupidest scenes in Disney history. The entire scene is basically just one big joke. And literally, the only joke is that this character is drunk. That's it. That's the whole joke. Because aren't drunk people so funny? The characters also act like this is common for him, so whether he intended to get drunk here or not, it is clear he has a problem with getting drunk. This makes his character comparable to an alcoholic, which just makes the joke even worse. I thought we as a society ought to help people who are drunk, whether that be to prevent them from hurting themselves or other people, or to aid them in fighting alcohol addiction. Well, apparently this movie thinks it's a much better idea to laugh at and mock people who are drunk. Absolutely despicable. And in the end of this scene, Thomas O'Malley states that he likes Uncle Waldo, seemingly only because he is drunk.
I like Uncle Waldo.
And then Duchess essentially agrees with him and makes it clear that she likes him because he is drunk.
Especially when he's marinated.
Firstly, that's even more points against Thomas O'Malley, but furthermore, this movie is basically promoting the idea of getting drunk by saying people will like you more if you drink and get drunk. That's definitely not a terrible and potentially dangerous message to send to people at all. I mean, it wasn't even fully Waldo's fault that he got drunk. It's pretty clear that he got drunk by accident. So why does he have to be the butt of the joke? Because apparently, if someone makes a mistake, we should all laugh at them for said mistake.
Go ahead, make fun of me. Okay, I'll go first.
According to this movie, that's what we should do, which I don't think I need to tell you is pretty messed up. Well, next up, more Edgar shenanigans. But first, a pointless scene that adds nothing to the plot, as Mr. Mouse What's-His-Name tries to follow Edgar but fails, which is genuinely the most pointless scene in the whole movie, which is truly saying something. Just cutting to Edgar in the countryside wouldn't have changed anything. Of course, that scene being pointless doesn't really matter, since this entire sequence, which is a whole 8 minutes of the movie, is equally just as pointless. As already said, we never needed these scenes with the dogs in the first place. They add nothing to the plot. And furthermore, this second scene here is even more pointless than the first, because it never would have needed to be in the movie in the first place if Edgar just didn't lose his stuff in the countryside in the first scene. So that means the previous scene is not only guilty of being pointless, it is guilty of setting up another equally as pointless scene. But as for Edgar in the Loony Tunes 2, Sneakeroo Boogaloo, just how bad is this scene? Well, I kid you not. There is a solid 3.5 minutes of Edgar sneaking around and trying to get his stuff back. I smell filler, and it's not just stealing back his stuff. It's the world's worst stealing back of anyone's stuff ever seen. Firstly, we have to endure a painful amount of Edgar walking around with his squeaky shoes while the dogs try to deduce what they are hearing. This then leads to Edgar using, I kid you not, a fishing pole to fish his hat off the leader dog's head from inside of a haystack. And when the dog notices his hat is missing, despite the fact that he looks directly up in this scene, he somehow does not see Edgar. But somehow, that wasn't enough. When Edgar's plan fails in order to increase the runtime, oops, I meant to say increase the tension, we have to watch an additional, way too long scene of Edgar scratching the dog's back. And he does this somehow without being able to see, since he is inside the haystack. And when he does eventually succeed, he literally grabs the hat with his mouth. Then he proceeds to collect the basket of which the cats were in. And during this, the leader dog once again sees what is happening and does nothing. Can he not see? Is his eyesight really bad? Or is he just incompetent? You looked directly at where Edgar is. How did you not see him? And then he literally takes the umbrella right in front of this dog's face, and somehow he still doesn't know it was Edgar. And after all that, the dogs are finally provoked into action. And I kid you not, one of the dogs accidentally steps perfectly into Edgar's shoes.
Inconceivable!
They then waste more of our time by sneaking around and running into each other. Oh, but we're not done yet. The shenanigans have only just begun. That was just the first half of this scene. scene. What happens next? Honestly, I don't even know how it can be described. The leader dog hears and spots Edgar attempting to leave, riding inside the haystack on top of the sidecar away from the countryside. Alright, where do I even start? Firstly, how on earth did Edgar get the entire haystack on top of the sidecar? Cause remember, the haystack was in front of the sidecar, not on top of it. Additionally, he would have had to go and get the sidecar since it was pushed away from the haystack not long ago. Furthermore, he is somehow able to ride the sidecar despite the fact it only has one wheel and absolutely no steering capabilities. And all this while inside the haystack, which would be obscuring his vision. Not to mention, he had to be doing all this while the two dogs are on the lookout for the criminal and watching in separate directions.
That doesn't make any sense.
It's funny because it's unexpected.
So, get this. Here is what would have needed to happen in order for this scene to take place in the way it does. Edgar would have to either leave the haystack and go all the way over to the sidecar, grab it, and then walk all the way back over to the haystack without being noticed, or suspiciously walk with the entire haystack all the way over to where the sidecar was pushed to, and then he would have to lift himself and the entire haystack onto the sidecar while keeping it perfectly balanced and not losing any of the hay in the process, and then push off the ground with enough strength and force to make the sidecar move, using his entire body weight to steer the sidecar without it tipping over and not being able to see very well due to the haystack blocking his view. All of this without ever being noticed by the two dogs who were looking for him the entire time and who made sure to look in every direction.
What?
You have to be joking if you think that series of events could logically have happened.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Of course, the animators obviously knew this as well and just chose to not show us, hoping we wouldn't notice.
Thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
I'm usually pretty good at suspending my disbelief, but this is way past pushing it. And on top of all that, him leaving the scene doesn't even make sense. He lost his shoes, and the only reason he came here was to remove the evidence he left behind last time, which means he's just delaying the inevitable by trying to leave now without his shoes. Well, anyways, the dogs do notice him, of course, and jump into the haystack after him. We then get a brief duel in the haystack, which ends with the dogs conveniently being thrown into a cart that runs into a house, while Edgar uses a tree to swing around in the opposite direction, and then, I kid you not, in the next shot of Edgar, we see him riding his motorcycle, the main part, not the sidecar. Where did he get this? Was it waiting just off screen?
The world may never know.
Oh, and did I mention that Edgar has magically reacquired his shoes off screen during the chase while he was headed in the opposite direction of his shoes? Cheating, cheating, cheating. That's what all this is. Cheating. And this is also the last time we ever see these two dogs. Minus one joke at the end of the movie, of course. Well, gee, that sure might just be a contender for the stupidest scene in Disney animation history. Well, back to the actual plot of the movie. As you can see, it genuinely feels like flipping between two different movies with how disconnected Edgar's plot is from the cats. But for as pointless as the last scene was, I find it preferable to this scene because honestly, while this scene is more related to the plot, I find it to be much more boring. You know, when the cats go to Thomas O'Malley's place, blah blah something something song. Honestly, I don't even find the song to be that good either. For some reason, everyone always says this song is really catchy, but I have never understood that, and it's not because I don't like jazz or anything. I actually do. I just think the song is really repetitive with its lyrics, as well as being boring and nonsensical. I mean, why would everyone want to be a cat anyways?
And when everyone's
a cat.
No one will be.
The song doesn't even give enough evidence or support to the idea of everyone wanting to be a cat. Also, Duchess has her own part in the song, but it's just more of the women are soft and romantic baloney we've already gone over. And the animation here, while colorful, is also really boring to look at. The backgrounds are really flat and the bright colors are too much in my opinion. Not to mention the amount of times the screen flashes here is subject for a warning. It just looks ugly. I'm sorry, but it's true. Honestly, as a kid, I always remembered this being one of the boring parts you had to sit through to get back to the good parts. Of course, back then, I actually thought there were good parts in this movie. And lastly, we can't forget how this song is also the biggest culprit when it comes to the racist aspects of this film. Pretty much all the cats in this band are a bit stereotypical, but some are much worse than others.
Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Fuyang.
fortune cookie, always wrong. Not the hot one.
This Chinese cat character gets a big yikes from me. This is one of the most blatant cases of racism in any film I have ever seen, and to such a laughable degree. Like, seriously, having a character just nonsensically spout out the names of Chinese cities for no reason in the middle of a song, while speaking in an extremely stereotypical accent, and using chopsticks to hit the piano keys, all while his design has racist Asian stereotypical facial features. He even slams a symbol on his head at one point to mimic and mock traditional Chinese hats. And if that wasn't enough, they also have to have him mention fortune cookies. You know, something that wasn't even invented in China. They weren't even trying to hide their obvious disdain for Chinese people when making this character. Truly atrocious and embarrassing on the part of Disney. In fact, this might be the single most racist moment in all of Disney animation. After the African-American worker scene in Dumbo, that is. So, somehow, despite Thomas O'Malley's friends being destructive weirdos that literally destroyed the floors of the building and walked off into the night with broken instruments like crazy people, Duchess has yet to either be turned away from Thomas O'Malley, nor has she changed and found his lifestyle better than her old one. This is what I like to call the romantic women paradox, in which the writers want to portray their ideal rugged man as being the ultimate attractive hero, but they absolutely refuse to have the Duchess not act in a way that they think is unfitting for a woman. No matter how crazy the situation, they don't want Duchess to like O'Malley because she likes the things he likes and they fit together perfectly. No. The writers want to put their idea of a perfect man and a perfect woman together, no matter how much they do not fit, because it is a part of their male dominance agenda. Of course, this is a movie from 1970, so complaining about the agendas of people who are either dead or old is pointless. However, just because the movie is old doesn't mean its flaws will magically just disappear. Sorry about that. I just wanted to say how frustrating this movie's obvious biases are. And then we also get some more lovey-dovey stuff not long after, but nothing really new to say. So instead, I just want to point out how absurd it is for Duchess to have even fallen in love with Thomas O'Malley in the first place. After everything he has done in the movie, he is the person who arguably deserves her love the least. I mean, let's see. He bragged about how great he is when he first showed up, showing that he's clearly self-obsessed. He then objectified pretty much every woman he ever met immediately, even though he didn't even know who they were. He started flirting with them like they're his girlfriend. And then he attacked and stole from an innocent person. And later, when he ended up in trouble, he insulted the people who saved him and didn't even thank them, only to shortly later also mock a drunk person just for the fact that they were drunk. And lastly, he seems to hang out with a group of friends who are questionable at best. O'Malley's actions could never convince me that his intentions have anything to do with anything other than him wanting a pretty girl to be his. Sure, he offers to be the Kittens' dad, but all they have done together is take a big walk from point A to point B. Them wanting him to be their dad shows that they're clearly desperate and have some trust issues, more than anything else. And well, here we are at last. The incredibly dumb ending to this movie. And then we'll finally be done. Edgar manages to catch the cats as they arrive, declaring it unfair that they have returned, and honestly, I agree. Also, the mouse character fails to warn the cats because he tripped. You know, not because he would have been too late or anything, just a classic trip during an important moment. Which means that this entire finale and Thomas O'Malley's ultimate acceptance into this family depends on this mouse tripping right here at this exact moment. And then we get literally the only scene in this movie where the mouse character is actually relevant to the plot. Here he runs to get help, but because dramatic tension, he doesn't actually hear Thomas O'Malley's name correctly. But getting Thomas O'Malley isn't the hard part, unless of course you count the verbal abuse he suffers from the jerk.
You mean you want me?
You know, because, all he did was question the logic of a mouse asking dangerous cats for help, and Thomas O'Malley just shouts at him as if it was some crime to voice his fears or something. But anyways, when he actually does go get those cats, him not hearing Thomas O'Malley's name helps to fill the runtime. Oops, I mean it adds more dramatic tension, of course. Though, to be fair, this part where he tries to remember Thomas O'Malley's name and fails is literally the first joke that was actually funny in this entire movie. So I can partially forgive the stretching of the runtime a little bit. Anyway, back to Edgar. His new plan involves shipping all the cats all the way to Timbuktu, but that honestly begs the question, why didn't he do this in the first place? He wouldn't have even needed to go anywhere in order to get rid of the cats, and it would have been more foolproof altogether. But then of course he wouldn't have had any of the movie at all, which honestly might be preferable. And it also appears that he just called the shipping company before this big battle scene, and this scene could surely not have lasted more than 15 minutes at most, which means that they must have been one of the fastest shipping companies I have ever heard of. And if they are really so fast, then there is certainly no reason why he couldn't have just used the sleep drug on the cats during the day originally and pulled off his plan perfectly in the first place, as the cats would surely still be asleep, especially if they could sleep through all the loud motorcycle sounds.
Sometimes the easiest solution is the last thing on your mind.
But either way, his plans are interrupted by Thomas O'Malley, and the two begin to duel it out, and I must say, I noticed a bit more cheating while watching this scene. Just look at this part where the ladder is falling. Edgar is holding a sickle when the ladder is falling, and based on both his position and the sound of the ladder falling, as well as the horse's reaction, we can safely deduce that the ladder fell on top of him. Yet, in the very next shot, we see him standing up with no injuries or even a quick cartoonish shaking of his head, no ladder to be seen, and no sickle. Instead, he is holding a pitchfork. It's like they just cut out a whole section of the battle and thought we wouldn't notice.
But we did.
The duel then concludes with Edgar somehow missing a point-blank toss at Thomas O'Malley and then letting in the other cats. I mean, what was his plan? Shouldn't he have finished off Thomas O'Malley for sure first before opening the door? And wouldn't he have at least listened to the door to hear the cat's sound and a distinct lack of car sounds, which is why he opened the door in the first place, I assume, in anticipation of the shipping people, since they don't actually explain why he opened the door, he just does.
But why? Why would you do that? Why would you do any of that?
And then we get another one of the dumbest scenes in this movie, when the mouse guy is trying to find the combination for the lock and yells, "Quiet!"
Quiet!
Sure, everyone freezing in place is kind of funny, the only other scene in this movie to even be remotely close to actual comedy, but it is complete and utter nonsense plot-wise. Reason 1. Why would Edgar ever stop attacking? Does he just listen when anyone says quiet? I mean, he literally just stands there while directly watching this mouse foil his plan. It's like he was patiently waiting for his plan to be foiled. And then, when the mouse opens the safe, he just goes back to fighting. Dude, did you seriously not just see this mouse sabotaging your plan? You were looking directly at him! As we could see here, Edgar managed to get free of the cats off screen, which means that he was definitely just standing around doing nothing because he could have easily stopped the mouse guy, but just didn't cause joke, haha, funny. But furthermore, there is another huge issue here. How can Edgar even hear him say quiet? I thought, according to the earlier scene where he spills the beans about his plans to the horse and the mouse, implied that he couldn't hear the animals. But there is also evidence to imply that maybe he could. Like when he's sneaking around trying to get his stuff back, he only takes his shoes off after he hears the dogs talking about squeaky shoes, implying that he took his shoes off because he heard them talking about the squeakiness and realized they were giving away his position. So, which is it? Can he hear the animals or not? I'll tell you what I think. I think this movie doesn't even know the answer to that question. It's sheer inconsistency and bad writing, I say. Also, this ties into another fact. If Edgar does know the animals can talk and thus are sentient, it makes him being put behind the cats in the well even more insulting, as he wasn't just being stupid, he was genuinely being screwed over despite all his work in favor of spoiled brats who never earned anything they had. I can't go without saying that the animators also clearly got lazy during this scene, and shamelessly reused this shot here, which, I kid you not, was used in this same movie less than 3 minutes ago. Were they really on such a tight schedule and /or budget that they couldn't be bothered to draw 1 second more of animation? Well, either way, this is where Edgar gets defeated once and for all. And of course, it's only because of more plot convenience. And are we supposed to be happy that Edgar is shipped away? As I have made it clear, he barely did anything to actually deserve this. The man-eating dogs from the earlier scenes are far worse than him. I honestly feel bad for Edgar. His life was completely ruined by his unkind and disrespectful Madame, who chose to prioritize her spoiled pets over a hard-working human being who had never done her any wrong. And we actively expected to get what he was rightfully owed, we are supposed to cheer at him failing. Absolutely pathetic. And well, at long last, we have the last scene in this movie. We get to hear some nonsense about how Edgar would have stayed if he had known about the will. However, this is followed immediately by the Madame announcing her house will essentially become a zoo. It's actually laughable to think Edgar would have stayed had he known this, not only giving the inheritance to the cat, but also bringing in more cats to reduce the value of what would have otherwise been his first. And well, after that, I guess the movie is over now. Truly atrocious stuff, but there are still a few points I need to make. The first of these final two notes, and the more important one I have to say, is that absolutely none of the characters learn anything or grow as people in any meaningful way.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
Thomas O'Malley gets everything he wanted by being a jerk for the whole movie. He doesn't change a shred from when we first met him. Duchess is stiff as stone as well when it comes to character progression, and none of the kittens learn anything either. They're pompous, rich, and self-obsessed at the beginning of the movie, and pompous, rich, and self-obsessed by the end of the movie. The only difference for them is going from not having a dad to having a dad, which has absolutely nothing to do with them as people. And this lack of character development is an absolutely massive blow against the movie, since one of the only ways it could have redeemed itself would be to have the cats realize they can't keep living as spoiled, pampered brats, and through their journey home, they would have to learn the value of hard work, thus earning the rights to the inheritance, which, while it wouldn't have necessarily put Edgar in the wrong, it would make it so that they actually do deserve to win in the end to a certain extent. But furthermore, the lack of character development just makes the movie feel boring, since nothing ever changes. It's static throughout and feels thoroughly flat. In fact, that brings me to my second final point, that this whole movie just feels boring in general. The closest thing to a good character in this movie is the mouse, and even he would just be a mediocre character in any other movie. The animation is boring and lacks the style, design, smoothness, or color of most other Disney animated movies. Even the very basic premise that the entire movie is based on is boring. Why on earth would I ever care about a movie about a butler who kidnaps cats and then the cats go on a road trip to get back home? It's just a boring and uninteresting idea for a movie in the first place. The only scenes that are even remotely entertaining are the Looney Tunes scenes with the dogs, and they are completely irrelevant to the rest of the plot. If they were standalone shorts, they might be interesting, but they only serve to show just how boring the rest of the movie is in comparison. In conclusion, I find the Aristocats to be one of the very worst movies Disney has ever released. And ironically, despite it not even being all that popular, it's overrated by sheer fact of not being hated enough, in my personal opinion, of course. But hey, if you think there is something redeemable about this movie, please tell me in the comments down below, because I genuinely do not know, and I am always open to hearing others' opinions. But for me, the Aristocats is actually even worse than Ralph Breaks the Internet, though I called that movie Disney's greatest atrocity because it came from a more greedy point of view and insulted a really great movie that came before it, whereas this movie is just plain bad in ways that no one remembers because no one cares. Well, except me, I suppose. But certainly not because I like it. Well, that concludes my analysis, but if you want to, you can also follow me on social media, as well as leave a like on the video or subscribe if you enjoy my content. If you want to support me further than that, then you can also join my Patreon or become a channel member like all these lovely people scrolling by right here. If you've still got the time, then why not stick around and watch another one of my videos, like the previous part in this Disney Unholy Trinity series, where I talk about how awful Ralph Breaks the Internet is. Or perhaps it's the final part in this series, if you're watching this video after I've uploaded that one. Or perhaps you just want to watch another one of my Disney videos, in which I have an entire playlist over here which has every single Disney video that I've made thus far. But most importantly of all, always remember to be iconic.